Evening. I'm Marcia Linsky, former magistrate, prosecutor, and currently criminal defense attorney. I am using On the Level with Linsky to introduce new ideas and concepts involving the criminal justice system. I'm hoping to provide information and hopefully we all learn something along the way. Tonight it's my honor to have my guest, Wendy W. Davis, a current candidate for Congress and former judicial officer. For the past 12 years, Wendy has served as judge for the state of Indiana and was the first female Allen Circuit Court judge. She served on the bench in both Allen Superior and Allen Circuit Court. She presided over Hope Court and the OWI Specialty Courts and Circuit Court. Her passion for combating the drug crisis in Indiana can be evidenced by her appointment in 2015 by then Governor Pence to the Governor's Task Force on Drug Enforcement, Treatment, and Prevention, where she, along with other Indiana state officials and law enforcement, helped to implement statewide solutions to the drug crisis in Indiana. It's my honor to welcome retired Judge Davis. Good evening.
Good evening, Marcia. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's so nice for you to be here tonight. I know you've got a very busy schedule.
I do.
You're running for Congress. Is that correct?
I am. So Representative Jim Banks, who represents the 3rd District in Indiana, has vacated his seat to run for Senate. So it's kind of a domino effect. Senator Braun is running for governor, so he's vacating his seat to run for governor. Jim Banks is vacating his seat to run for Senate, and I vacated my circuit court seat to run for Congress to represent the 3rd District.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's going to keep you very busy.
It does. It does. There's 13 counties, about 12 counties, all full counties, but yeah, 13 in the district.
And I think I did see. You were raised here in Indiana? Is that correct?
Yeah. I was.
Yeah.
So I was raised, and many people that know me knew me as a lawyer and then as a judge. And I usually look like this, very professional. But I grew up on County Line Road. I grew up. We had a very small farm. I grew up on a small farm in Allen County, and our mailbox was in Whitley County, so right on the County Line Road, back in the day where there was nothing around me but cornfields. My dad was not our farmer. We had a farmer that farmed our land. He worked in agriculture, in the agriculture business with soybeans at Central Soya.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. What made you then decide to go to law school?
That's a great question. I've told this story multiple times, but it's a fun story. I was in college. I went to Wheaton College, a strong Christian conservative school, and I was a political science major. And my junior year, I spent the entire semester. I went to American University in Washington, D.C., and I worked on Capitol Hill with Senator Lugar, if everybody remembers Senator Lugar. And Senator Lugar and I used to run. He was a big runner. Now, keep in mind, Marcia, I was a peon in his office. I was like up in the mailroom. But he took interest in me and knew that I really wanted to get in politics some way. And so one day we were running, because we still run after session, and he said, "Wendy, what do you want to do when you graduate from college?" And Marcia, I literally said to him, "I'm going to run for Congress." And he's like, ah. And actually, Senator Lugar was the one that encouraged me to go to law school. So I went to law school, and my second year of law school, I got married, and my husband was a United States Army officer. He was a doctor in the U.S. Army. So I finished my 3rd year of law school when we were stationed at Fort Sam Houston, and I finished my 3rd year of law school in San Antonio, took the Texas bar, and then started my career as a prosecutor.
Prosecutor, state or federal level?
I worked briefly at the U.S. Attorney's Office writing appellate briefs when I was finishing my law school. And then I flipped over to the District Attorney's Office, and I was an assistant district attorney. Years into it, I was put on a federally funded drug and violent crimes task force, and was able to kind of see the drugs firsthand coming into the country back then in Texas, but not like it is now. But anyway, so did that. And then when we decided to have a family, my husband and I moved back to Northeast Indiana.
Okay. So it was wanting to raise your family in this area.
Yes,
That
I was
brought you
raised
back
here. I wanted to raise my family. We wanted to raise my family here.
Understood. Is your husband still involved with the military?
He is. He is back. He's not in the U.S. Army now. He's in the Air Force out at the 122nd Air National Guard. He is a lieutenant colonel out at the Guard, and he is their critical care air transport physician. And so he works in private practice at Orthopedics Northeast, but then he's also lieutenant colonel that just came back from an advanced course. So he's pretty trained up now as a critical care air transport doctor, and probably could be deployed even if the 122nd doesn't, but I don't know that for sure.
Now, he's not the only member of your family, if I'm not mistaken, who has some military involvement. Is that correct?
Yes, there is a reason why I'm running for Congress, as I see our national security being threatened. But yes, I have 3 children. My oldest daughter's in Dallas. My middle son graduated from West Point Military Academy last year, and he is a new young officer training at Fort Benning. And then I have a young son that's a senior in high school.
Oh, nice.
So I've got 2 in uniform. Yep, 1 U.S. Army and 1 here locally at the 122nd.
Nice. Now, were you ever with the prosecutor's office here in Allen County?
I was. So, Marcia, you probably remember this because you were my magistrate. Marcia and I actually have had a lot of fun together. We've kind of got stories to tell as I've progressed through my career and as you've progressed through your career. But I was a partner at the law firm of Beckman Lawson here locally and doing federal litigation. And Karen Richards reached out to me and had lunch and said, hey, would you come back to the prosecutor's office and try some of my high-level felonies? And actually, it worked out really well. I was still a partner in a law firm, but I did do that part-time. And I knew I wanted to run for judge. I wanted to do... I'm a public servant at heart, and so I loved private practice, but I knew I was going to run for judge, so that was a perfect segue to get into the criminal justice system here in Allen County.
And what year was it that you were elected to the bench?
2010.
Okay.
I was in a very hotly contested election in 2010. I ran against a longtime incumbent and then took the bench in 2011 in Superior Court, and then was in Superior Court for many years, about 9-10 years, and then flipped around and ran for the circuit court.
What made you decide to go from Superior to Circuit?
So in Superior Court, we are very specialized in Superior Court. So I was just criminal felony, where in the circuit court, which is one of the largest courts in Northeast Allen County as far as what you do and the amount of people, and you run the probation department. But circuit court is a general jurisdiction court. So what that means is I could put to use all of my skills of civil law, family law, criminal law. Being general jurisdiction can be a little bit trying at times. I'll use that word. But I had a great law clerk, and the circuit court handles all kinds of cases, not just felonies.
Okay. And you worked a lot with what are referred to as specialty courts or kind of diversion courts.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about those courts.
Sure. So problem-solving courts are really a new way of doing business in the court system. And I know, Marcia, you've had a lot of clients that you've asked to be put in those courts. But bottom line, I ran a drunk driving court. So if someone had a felony drunk driving, obviously a felony means they've got 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 OWIs. You've seen those. Mm-hmm. And so clearly they need help, right? If they're drinking and driving that much. And driving is dangerous. Drinking and driving is dangerous. So we ran a problem-solving court there. I had a mental health and addiction court. And in that court, we did a diagnosis if you had mental health issues plus addiction issues. And as you know, now here in Northeast Indiana, we have a lot of fentanyl. And you see that, Marcia, I know, in your practice. Yeah. And a lot of opiates. So that's another problem-solving court. And then the last one was a veterans court, which was near and dear to my heart. But basically, we divert them, as you know, away from the jail and out of incarceration and give them the help and stability they need to overcome their addiction and mental health issues.
Do you think with alcohol being such a prevalent and legal substance that it makes a difference in the counseling and how you approach some of those programs? Or
definitely.
Is addiction just addiction?
Well, you, Marcia, you know, too. You're asking me softball questions, and you know a lot of the answers to these because you're a really good defense lawyer. But different addictions are different. I do think that the fentanyl crisis right now is, I mean, I've had people in my problem-solving courts that they're in treatment, and they can still go find the fentanyl somewhere and overdose and die. So the fentanyl, alcohol is a little different, too. It's legal. more acceptable on a social level. And so, I know good friends of mine that struggle from alcoholism, even currently. And so, are the addictions different? Yes. Do you treat them the same? No. Is the treatment different? The treatment is kind of the same, people, places, and things. Get them medically assisted treatment. Make sure that they're not in the same environment they were in when they were using, meaning, do we need to put them in a halfway house? Do we need to put them in inpatient treatment? So a lot of their treatment is individually driven, not necessarily based on the drug, but based on what they are suffering from.
Okay. And yeah, that was part of why I asked that with the alcohol, because I found so often for clients that I've had, the accessibility of alcohol, the social acceptability of
Right.
alcohol makes it more difficult on occasion for them to abstain.
Yep.
Is that
So true.
Yeah. And I know in the OWI courts, anabuse, the medically assisted treatment, is used. Yeah, you can see, is used quite frequently. Is there a reason? Is it just simply that it's successful, or tell us about that aspect of the program?
Right. I'm gonna take my jacket off. I'm a little warm. So anabuse has proven to be a drug that can help. What anabuse does is, supposedly what it does, if I'm on anabuse and I drink, I will get very sick. But there are some people that can drink through it. So anabuse works for some people, doesn't work for all people. So if I see someone struggling, if they're on anabuse and they're struggling with an alcohol addiction and they continue to test dirty for alcohol, we usually pivot and try other medically assisted treatments like Vivitrol. Or, sometimes, Marcia, it just means they do need to spend a night in jail, just to say, are you serious about getting clean and sober? We try not to use jail. That's our last resort. But there are other avenues. But I think now medically assisted drugs or medically assisted treatment for certain drugs like fentanyl and alcohol, anabuse is one type. It's a one tool in the toolbox. I don't think it's the one size fits all for drinking.
And the medically assisted treatment, that has become something that has become more of a tool in the specialty courts and the diversion courts.
It really has taken it to a whole new level. The medically assisted treatment, and some people are afraid of it, and you really should not be afraid of it. It's like a blocker. So if I'm starting to crave fentanyl, if I'm starting to crave an opiate, or even crave alcohol, something like Vivitrol, which is just it's not a drug, it's not even a vaccine. Okay, we're not going down the vaccine road, but it has been proven that it's very, very helpful to help them abstain from the draw to the drug, the craving.
And you've found that to actually be useful. And it's not one of these things. I know the court system has often in probation has some concerns about methadone because it's seen as replacing kind of one drug for another drug. Vivitrol and abuse, that's not in the same category.
Correct. Methadone has some street value to it. And when I say street value, that means you can kind of get a little high from it, right? Same with Suboxone. So we've seen that from Suboxone. Now, as a judge, I don't love Suboxone or methadone. And Marcia, I think you've seen me. You know I don't think that. I don't think it's popular among I have to clarify, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. However, I'm a judge holding people accountable when they're trying to get clean and sober, and I have a bigger stick than the therapist does. And so my experience is that many times you hit the nail on the head. The methadone only replaces the drug they're addicted to, and then they get to a point where they can't live their life without methadone. And although some therapists will tell you that that's the only way they can live, I'm a judge running a court where they've been arrested for a felony. I'd like to have them completely clean unless it's going to hurt their sustainability in life, which normally it doesn't.
And
you're asking very controversial questions in the drug world. What is the proper drug and what is the proper use? And I can only speak for me, but I went to law school, so the therapists and the professionals in the addiction world want to tell me what to do, which is I need to listen to them, but I also need to make sure that people in my courtroom are not taking advantage of getting a free drug somewhere else.
It can be a difficult
Tricky.
balance to find on occasion, especially depending on the individual involved in the program.
Correct.
If a person goes through a diversion court and they're successful, is it possible to avoid that felony conviction?
Absolutely. And Marcia, you've done that for many of your clients. Just so y'all know, Marcia is asking me questions she knows a lot of the answers to because she herself is an expert in this field because she practices in the field. And the answer is yes. If you have a felony drug case, a felony OWI, if you get caught in circuit court, the majority of those now are diversions. Shout out to our elected prosecutor, Mike McAlexander, who has made it possible that those that get arrested for those types of offenses can go through these programs, go through these problem-solving courts, and come out on the other side without a felony, which is huge.
Well, and I want to thank you as a defense lawyer for the work you did when you first came on the bench in circuit court ensuring that the felony OWIs, depending on the number of priors, are then eligible for a diversion program. So if they don't have that prior felony, it is possible to avoid that felony conviction.
And diversion, we talk as lawyers. So diversion means I get hit with a felony OWI and I'm not convicted of it, but I go through a 2.5-year program where I get clean and sober, typically working full-time, back with my family, and the felony gets dismissed.
And so I guess so everyone understands, too, in light of that, talking like lawyers, these diversion programs, there is oversight for those, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you get into one of these problem-solving courts or specialty courts, as you call them, they have to report to the judge. The first phase, so it's a 2.5-year program. The first phase, they are coming to court and just reporting to me twice a month. So that's a lot. That's a lot. But they're also getting tested 5 times a week. They're put on a hotline. They get called in to get tested. I mean, they may only see me twice a month. However, they are seeing their probation officer or their community corrections officer at least 3 times a week, if not more, or somebody. They're in some sort of class or outpatient treatment. Some of them almost every day. Their addiction is that harsh.
And there's also some state-level oversight over these programs as well, isn't there?
Correct. The Supreme Court has to certify the courts. So all 3 of the problem-solving courts that I had in circuit court had so much oversight. We had to go through a certification every 3 years to make sure that the medically assisted treatment we're doing correctly, that the accountability there is done correctly, so much oversight. So we had a formal certification process that we went through every 3 years.
Okay. So it's that although you get some discretion within your program, there's
the Supreme Court regulates it, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it would be the kind of program, usually with the diversion programs, I would have to enter a plea of guilty to be accepted into the program.
That's a good one. You should probably go ahead and clarify that. You enter a plea of guilty, but that's where the word deferral comes in. I didn't want to get someone tripped up. And then when you say you're guilty, because I just want to hear you take responsibility for your actions, Marcia, right? Like if you get picked up for possession of a syringe or, possession of fentanyl or OWI, as a judge for the last 12 and a half years, if I'm going to put you into a program and I'm going to really work with you to divert you from the jail, get you clean and sober and back living, I want to hear you take responsibility. So you're going to say, I'm guilty. You're going to tell me what you did. And you've been in my court. I'm like, oftentimes you'll say, Judge, can I help? And I'm like, nope, I want to hear it from them, right?
Yes.
And so, but as soon as they say they're guilty, then I say, okay, I'm going to defer that guilt. That's what the deferral means. I'm going to defer that guilt, place you into this program, and then at the end of it, it's deferred. Then I enter the not guilty.
Okay. During your tenure on the bench, especially, well, I guess both in Superior and Circuit Court, you would sentence people, but you would also then sometimes on occasion review that sentence after the fact and perhaps modify that sentence.
I did. I started doing that in Superior Court. So the Indiana Department of Corrections has really come a long way with their therapeutic communities. And so the Indiana Department of Corrections, if it was a drug case and they got themselves in the therapeutic community in DOC, so Department of Corrections. So they have, resources there, and they've got a whole therapeutic community. I've toured that therapeutic community at Westville. If they then they could write me a letter and say, and usually I sentenced them on a drug case. It's not like it, let me clarify, it wasn't murder, rape, or molest. Or anything like that, but it was typically some sort of high-level drug case. And so if they would go through the therapeutic community, oftentimes they would write me letters and tell me they graduated, and I would modify them out early on an ankle bracelet, typically through work release, so kind of stepping them down back into society. Now, the minute they started using drugs again, if that ever happened, they go back. But I had such great success in the drug world. And I learned that when I was on that drug task force that Governor Pence put me on. Statewide, Governor Pence and a lot of the other Republican legislators, because I'm a Republican, we worked together to come up with solutions. And that was something that came from that too, was learning how to really utilize the therapeutic community in the Indiana Department of Corrections and then stepping them down. A lot of times they come on, they're like, I'm clean, send me home. And I'm like, no. Then, put them on an ankle bracelet, put them in work release oftentimes. When they did well in work release, then I'd modify them out of work release on the ankle bracelet back to home. Then once they're on an ankle bracelet at home, once they prove to me that they're clean, sober, not committing crimes, and they really truly are rehabilitated, then I would take the ankle bracelet off and put them on probation and let them finish out their sentence. And I had Marcia, you had some clients doing that. I was going to say, Marcia, you were the biggest offender. Judge, can you modify them out of the DOC? But we had some great success in doing that.
There were some people that truly made some amazing and substantial changes that sadly had kind of rotated in and out of the system on more than one occasion. And came out through that process and started doing extremely well.
And a lot of them, believe it or not, I have followed and they have followed me. And many of them now are working in the addictions world. Many of them, there's some Black men that have come back out to this community and want to work with the youth. And so they have taken they don't let their past define them, Marcia. And so they've taken whatever they went through, and they were completely rehabilitated, and now they're trying to pass it on to others to make sure they don't end up in the same place that they did.
Do you find that your experiences on the bench are driving part of your passion for your run for Congress?
100%. So 100%. That's the biggest question I get is why? Why would you leave circuit court, pivot, and run for Congress? And I will tell you, Marcia, when I went into circuit court, I saw the scourge of America come through the courtroom the last 2.5 years. And what I mean by that is Northeast Indiana, the cartels are here. Fentanyl is here. I mean, you know that. We don't call them the cartels because we're not allowed to use that language necessarily in the courtroom, but they're from the border. They speak Spanish. They're not U.S. citizens. They're dealing drugs in the community. I had one guy even in Superior Court that had like 17 counts of dealing in opiates and fentanyl. I had to give him an interpreter. I had to give him a public defender. All through taxpayers' dollars. And there's, the immigration system, unfortunately, is so broken right now. It's hard to get people even get them legalized if they're coming through. But the cartels, used to be, you remember this, 13 years ago, ICE would come pick them up. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find an ICE officer anywhere, right? So I'm reacting to all of these problems that I see coming through the courtroom. In circuit court, I saw needless litigation because when the economy took a turn, people were suing people and people didn't have money. And I have told this story, and I had a family law case where the mother and father were representing themselves because they couldn't afford a lawyer. And I looked at the father and I said, look, I'm going to recess. They're fighting over their kids. And this was like in the thick of, when our economy really started to take a plunge. And I said, you need to get some representation. This is very hard on the court when, and he was like, Judge Davis, I can't even feed my children. I can't afford a lawyer. So I'm seeing all this happening with the economy and with the border crisis and all of this stuff. And as a judge, you can't be political. You just react and react. And then as the new laws came out, I had a gal come through circuit court who was a felon. She was not in a problem-solving court, so that'll tell you something. And because of the jail overcrowding, I diverted her from the jail. And she came in, and her lawyer filed a motion to take the ankle bracelet off to go across state lines to have an abortion. So, all of these American issues are now getting clogged in the courtroom. And so when Congressman Banks decided to run for Senate, here I've been reacting to problems, and I can't be political, and I'm reacting to problems, and I think I've done a lot of good work on the bench. It was just time for me to pivot and use my strong political voice for Northeast Indiana to be more proactive and making the laws and creating the laws and representing America versus being reactive to somebody getting arrested or reacting to, and I did. I saw, believe it or not, Marcia, I saw a little 8-year-old boy sitting in front of me, and his mom was on the witness stand trying to convince me he's always been a girl. Because what they wanted me to do is they wanted me to give him a court order and write a big legal opinion on this little 8-year-old boy. And I don't believe in big government. I don't like government, but this is the kind of stuff I had to deal with. And so they wanted me to say it was in the best interest to change his true gender at this young age. And I didn't do it. And there's not a lot of precedent out there yet, about that. And so I did get appealed. The dissent, and so I got appealed. It was affirmed. A high court, the appellate court, agreed that he was best interest of the child. But there was pretty scathing dissent by one of the appellate court judges, basically saying this is discriminatory on this minor child. And though again, Marcia, I'm reacting to what's in front of me, and it's just time for me to pivot and help iron out what those laws should look like. Without putting a lot of big government, because I don't think government should be in our lives as much as it is.
Okay. Is there a website that people can go to learn more about you and your campaign?
Yes, thank you for asking. It's wendyforindiana.com. So it's WENDYFOR, so for Indiana.com, wendyforindiana.com. And yes, go to my website and you can read all about it and who I am and why I'm running.
Well, good luck with your campaign.
Thank
I want
you,
to
Marcia.
thank you again.
I miss you guys
here.
in the court system.
We miss you as well.
And I'll put a plug in for Marcia. If anybody needs a good criminal defense lawyer, I would hire her. And I've had her in front of me, and I know she gives me a hard time advocating for her clients.
Thank you. Well, I do want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you, Judge Davis, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here this evening. I hope that everyone has found this evening interesting and has learned some new information tonight. I hope you like the conversation about the specialty courts and the criminal justice system. These courts, such as we discussed tonight, and drug court that we featured previously, help divert people and allow them to potentially avoid felony convictions, allowing people to come back into the community stronger citizens and seeking treatment and getting necessary help as opposed to just being entrenched in the criminal justice system. Again, I want to thank you for being here and watching On the Level with Linsky. Until next month, thank you again.